Well, I wasn't quite sure about whether or not I was ready to start talking, but then I just made a voicemail message clip audio recording for one of my friends. Shout out to Kevin, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm ready to talk, because if I don't start making a podcast, I'm going to end up sending Kevin like a 30-minute clip, and he doesn't have time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. So I'll just make it for myself, you know. It is 12:13 p.m. Saturday the 6th of June, and it is 2026. And I'm on my way to my friend Ben's house. What's up, my dude? And I'm surprised it's a lot farther than I would expect. I still have 44 minutes that I need to go. But I'm on Highway 78 for a long portion of that. Going at least all the way out to Stone Mountain, and then looks like I'm getting off at like Old Stone Mountain Road, so it should be a pretty nice and easy drive. It's pretty warm out. What is the temperature? 82. I already went for a bike ride earlier, which was nice. I suppose I could turn on the air conditioning. I'm always so against doing that, just because I'm like, I feel like it's a luxury that I just don't require. And honestly, in situations that I'm not trying to make audio clips, it is a situation that I prefer. But it's just, it's going to be too loud to have the windows down, and it's going to be too hot to have them up. So, what's a girl to do? Well, sometimes you got to compromise, even with yourself. And so, here we are. Best of both worlds. I'm not sweating to death, and I can hear myself think. And you can too. So, yeah, quite a day so far. I woke up, I was hanging out with a friend of mine last night, Jake, shout out to Jake, and, you know, I would say we tied one on pretty good, as they say. I think I probably had, honestly, probably twice, if I'm honest with myself, I probably had 2 times as many beers as I prefer to even begin to remember. I didn't black out or anything like that, but for sure I woke up this morning feeling a little kissed by the hangover fairy. And I was just like, well, I mean, thankfully it wasn't that bad. Like, the worst hangover I've ever had in my life, I feel like what I had this morning was like 25% of that, which is like not so much to where I feel immobilized with nausea and like that weird kind of delicate feeling where like your proprioception is off and like your limbs don't seem to be responding to their place in space in the correct way, you know, but you know, just like, you know, it's like the first couple days of getting sick or something where you have like a tickle in your throat and you're like, well, this is persistent enough for me to not be able to ignore it, and it's certainly something that is affecting the quality of my life in these moments. And so, whatever, it's all good. I don't like feeling like that, but I do like having some beers with my dudes. So hopefully tonight I can behave myself a little better. Ben is a family man, so I can only hope that his responsibility will outdo and outshine my Bachelor indulgence. And yeah, feeling good about it. I'm ready to have a beer. It only took, 5 hours to get to the point where it wasn't a completely disgusting thought, you know? I'm not going to have a beer probably for another 5 hours, and I'm grateful for that. But in the meantime, you know, yeah. So anyway, woke up feeling a little vulnerable, a little fragile this morning, but nonetheless intent on, you know, pursuing my day the way that I wanted to. I am looking for a picture frame for a friend because I'd like to get him something to show that I appreciate him. And so far, shout out to my Uncle Steven, I have been to 2 estate sales, and this morning I went to Kudzu Antique Market. And it was interesting because I put my thoughts and this whole plan into Notebook LM, and they were describing why I've been enjoying this little errand/task, and I think that they put it in a really, really good light that makes sense to me. And it's funny too, I was just speaking to another friend about this, but like, basically, Notebook LM is so obviously created by people who are basically corporate knowledge workers. Like, Notebook LM always relates things back to corporate life and video games, which I think is just really funny because, like, I wish it was a little bit more expansive in the metaphors that it would draw, because most of the time it seems like the metaphors are based within those two realities, and thus is also the case here. And so they were saying that my use of this little errand is like when you're playing a massive open world video game and the main quest becomes too much to handle necessarily, and you need like a break from it, but you still want to play. And so you go and you do a side quest. And so they were like, what Kenneth is basically doing is going out and finding 10 rare herbs for a local merchant, which is definitely something you would do like in a video game, you know? And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's like, it's a low stakes task that's easy enough to complete, but also challenging enough to hold my attention. It's not like I can just go to Walmart and pick up a Baroque style frame. Like, I actually have to actively search it out, you know, and try to find it, which I always enjoy finding things. And speaking of finding things, this morning, two things that I also found on the road. One was, this is probably one of the best finds I've ever had, certainly like top 10, just in terms of practicality and utility. But I found a tube that someone had definitely just recently purchased and just recently dropped that happened to be the right size for my tires. So I got a new tube, so there's $8 saved right there. Plus, I was riding around with only one tube, and typically, especially for long events, you know, I always like to have at least two tubes, because there's always a chance that if you fix a flat or whatever and you replace it with a new tube, that something's going to happen. And like, if you didn't properly find the issue or whatever, you could also damage or destroy that new tube. So I like to have one in reserve all the time, and now I do again. And the other thing I found was pretty gross, was like a little coin purse, and I was like, ooh, money. And then I opened it up, and the only thing that was in there was a presumably used like plastic flosser that people use, you know, like the little, what does it look like, a little hook with a piece of dental floss. Pretty gross. I was just like, ew, that's nasty. I regret touching this, but you know, there's always a chance that there's like $400 or $500 bills inside of something like that. So, you know, fortune favors the brave. So, yeah. And what else? So, yeah, I went for a little bike ride to that kudzu antique place and walked around. My stomach was definitely out of sorts. And so I was glad that I was in an air-conditioned place that had bathrooms accessible. And I walked through, and I was just like, okay, I kind of know what I need to like be looking for, broadly speaking. But after doing a complete lap of the facility, I went up to the people who were working there, and I was like, hello. And they were like, hello. And I was like, can I pick your brains for a second? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, I have absolutely no aesthetic taste. Like, the thing that I experience when I come into a place like this is primarily just being shocked that people want more stuff than they already have. And not only do they want more stuff, but they want to pay extra for like older stuff from other people. It was interesting going through the estate sale of goods and items, because I have to tell you, the thing that I was thinking the entire time, beyond the fact that I was looking for a picture frame, was this is exactly what happens after someone dies. Like, immediately all of their things become unowned and like worthless to the person who is no longer there. And it's just crazy to watch human beings like pick over another human being's like precious things. You know, I don't mean to paint a grim picture, but I can't help but view it like that. Like, how many, I was looking at glassware, like wine glasses, and I was like, man, how many amazing nights that led to intimacy or great conversations or the conception of children, how many nights were contained within the vessels in these drawers, and how much of that is lost, those memories of like what these objects represented for the person who lived in the house. And now everything's being, you know, picked up and rummaged and rifled through like unceremoniously. And yeah, there was a profound lack of sacredness. I mean, you know, there's one thing to be said about generic stuff that you can like buy at Walmart, but I'll tell you, it's nice to know that when you buy something that's brand new, there's like no emotional baggage tied to it, aside from like if you start thinking about child labor or global warming effects of industrial industrial production. And I don't tend to think about those things because I'm just like, well, like, what's the alternative? We're trying to fix all that stuff as quickly as we can, and we're doing a pretty good job, so I'm not going to bum myself out. But yeah, going through another person's home is a very different experience. Honestly, as I reflect on it, I don't know if this is 100% true, but what it kind of felt like being in there was like being in the movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is a great movie. Certainly, talk about top 10s. That's one of my favorite top 10 movies ever. Highly recommend to anyone who hasn't seen it. There was a brief period of my time in my life where I was like interested in movies, and I watched a fair number of them. I think it was sort of a hobby for a little while when I was like in high school. It was mostly my friend Josh. Shout out to Josh. I feel like he had taste. He's an artist, and I am not. Even the way I play guitar is kind of like if you gave a robot a pick or something. I really think my guitar playing is a very direct expression of my emotional state and the common feelings that I feel. The ones that I like, the ones that build tension, the ones that dissipate that tension. For sure, I am technically an artist in that respect, and also in the respect of speaking, but, my artistic flair doesn't really extend beyond that. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm actually having a fantasy where if I had unlimited money, like, what would I actually do? Like, if I could decorate a house and I had carte blanche to do so, like, what would I actually do? Because I think I actually do have aesthetic taste. It's just funny to characterize myself as not having it, and it also gets me off the hook for how sparse and Spartan my actual living spaces are. I'm just like, yeah, but I don't know what looks good, and so I don't even try. But if I did have infinite money, I think I would probably get like a bunch of peculiar art. There was one thing that definitely drew my attention, which was a human anatomy. It was a framed picture from like an anatomy book, and it seemed like it was mostly the human head, but there was also an entire body form of a human in a certain pose, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, I would get, if I could just like throw it into if I could throw it into like a basket and just have it to be mine, I would do that if there was no financial impact whatsoever. Like, when I'm at a store like that and I see a painting or not even a painting, but like this anatomy thing, and I see that it's $112, the thing I think about immediately is that's like my food budget for 3 days and then some. So it's like 3.2%, like 3.2 times my food budget for 3 days. And so I'm just like, well, like, if something happened that was even more important that $112 could help to address within the next 3 days, which is likely, it's possible, I could need a new tire, my car could break down. Like, there are a lot of practical things that might actually need that money. And so that's definitely like the governing force of why I spend absolutely no time like thinking about aesthetics or comfort. Like, comfort for me, it's kind of a zero-sum game. It's kind of binary. Like, if I have a chair, I am comfortable. If I have a bed, I am comfortable. If I have something approximating a table, I am comfortable. And, like, it's interesting. I was thinking about it the other day when I was biking. Go figure. And I was like, yeah, like, consumerism it has taken the idea of like comfort and it has stretched it out to infinity, like in both directions in terms of minimalism and maximalism. And I certainly and firmly exist like in a very specific spot within that spectrum, which is certainly to the far side of minimalism. Like, I think if I could literally live like a caveman and be relatively comfortable with that, especially if the water was pristine, which there's no reason it would be, because even though human industrializing and modern life has certainly introduced a whole host of new toxins and things that will make you sick. Even back in the day, the water wasn't reliable because no one understood that you shouldn't poop in it. In fact, it's probably a very nice place to poop in. And all the other animals that would die in it and stuff like that. There's always been bad vectors for bad bugs through the water. Anyway, had a nice little time going to that place, that kudzu market, and I had a couple of thoughts. Okay, so these are two ideas that I had. One of them, I sometimes the title of books just like come to mind. Not that I would necessarily ever write a book like this, but I was thinking, I have a family friend, and one time he asked me, like, this is like a specifically Atlanta question too, which was kind of cool. But he asked me, he had said that his wife had been driving on DeKalb Avenue, and if you're not Atlantan, it doesn't matter. Just any road that fits the description that I'm about to describe will do. But my friend his wife was driving on DeKalb Avenue, and he said that she noted that the cyclist, although there was a bike lane, he was not in the bike lane, and then someone honked at him at some point, and then he flipped them off. And my friend asked me, because his wife was a little distraught by this, she might have been the one who was flipped off, I can't remember, but he was like, why would a cyclist choose to not bike in a bike lane when one is available? And it was so funny for me to hear this, because honestly, for me, the answer is so obvious. Like, it's so obvious that unless another human being volunteered a contrary idea, such as this man, I would never think that it was even something up for discussion. And I'm being a little hyperbolic there, because obviously not everyone bikes, but as a cyclist, and this man, he was an outdoors enthusiast himself, he had hiked the Appalachian Trail, so it was an interesting point of relief between the two of us, like sharp relief, like in terms of contrast, because I was like, oh, you don't know what it's like to bike on the road. So the problem with DeKalb Avenue is that, yes, true, it does have a bike lane in very specific portions of DeKalb Avenue, and very, very suddenly, outside of those very small portions of it, the bike lane will just suddenly end. And so as a cyclist, you have to figure out how you're going to put yourself back into the flow of traffic. And as someone who has biked on DeKalb Avenue easily thousands of times, for sure, if we're just talking about me purely being on that road for any amount of distance, then definitely thousands of times in the past few years. In fact, more even than that, decades. The safest thing for you to do in that situation is actually just to not use the bike lane, because you're going to have to reintegrate with the cars anyway. And so unless you're experiencing some sort of distress or feeling distraught, like, you might as well just stay with the cars, because it's actually going to be safer for you to already have an established position within the flow of traffic, rather than all of a sudden having to merge with cars that are probably going 3 or 4 or 5 times faster than you. You want to set the expectation that you're there and that you're claiming space just for your own safety. And I tried to explain this to my friend as delicately as possible. I went back and forth in my own head several times, because I didn't want to come off as like someone who was having a superiority ego trip, which I was very, very much so primed to do. But since that moment, I have taken thousands of mental pictures of areas, because I have thought often about making a book to actually explain this very thing, like a coffee table style book. And it would be a bunch of pictures showing, like, basically areas where a cyclist would have to make an important decision because of like crumbling infrastructure or poor route planning or whatever, just like anything that's like an obstacle to you mindlessly being able to traverse space. And today I came up with the title, which is a double entendre. It's Why We Cross the Line. And for the cover, I was thinking of having like a blurred cyclist going through a red lit intersection to show that he was like crossing the line, he was running the light. But also like crossing the line in terms of like being rational versus irrational, because the subtitle is a visual guide for understanding the rational systems underpinning irrational architecture. And so basically, like, it's all about being in the perspective of a cyclist. And I guess I could do this with my meta glasses more easily than with anything else I could think of, because if there's one good thing I can say about those meta glasses, it's that they were the most convenient form factor I have ever had for taking pictures. Certainly for video too, but then the battery's only going to last for like an hour or whatever. But yeah, quickly taking pictures is a cool thing. And I always like the idea of making like coffee table books. I like coffee table books. It's something to leaf through while you're having some coffee. Like, perfect combination, my dude. So that was one thought that I had. I had many others, but unfortunately, honestly, the meta glasses would be good for this too. But unfortunately, it's still pretty difficult for me to make notes on the fly. Everything goes through my headphones, and the microphone on those headphones is so terrible that usually it doesn't get what I'm trying to make it get. So anyway, I did have another thought, and I guess this will probably be my concluding thought for the episode. But as you know, I'm someone who has a lot of interest in the homeless population. I refuse to call them unhoused people, because I listened to George Carlin far too many times and was completely willfully indoctrinated in the idea that political speech is not to be trusted. George Carlin at length went over how euphemistic language is an indication that you are lying. If you call a group a certain word, that's because you're trying to take the emotion out of like whatever that word, whatever that noun is, whatever the baggage of what you're describing is, like so unpleasant for people to think about that you have to basically give it more or less a Latin name of like ambiguity, so that like saying it doesn't bring too many visuals that are upsetting to the human soul, which I think is funny, because it's just like, really? Like, George Carlin's example was the evolution of the word that eventually became post-traumatic stress disorder. And he goes over it from every major war where, originally people had what was called shell shock, and then that became battle fatigue, and then ultimately post-traumatic stress disorder. And he's like, the humanity's been completely removed. It's just, I feel that I don't like is it called political language? Or I don't know. I don't remember what it's called. But yeah, euphemisms. This is the road I'm supposed to take a left. That's true. Are you going to let me? Maybe. Looks like so far so good. Am I going to be able to get over? It looks like a yes. Thank you. So, okay. So, James, there's a man in my neighborhood named James. He's a homeless black man. He's a little older than I am, and he's very nice. He's not addicted to anything. He's got some definite cognitive issues, and I've seen him probably more often than I have seen anyone else since I moved to Atlanta. I mean, he's a homeless guy that lives like a block away, right? And I think he probably knows where I live by now, so he comes by fairly regularly. And so yesterday, I went to Publix to get some beers and dinner materials for myself and my friend, which, by the way, was funny. I volunteered to make my friend and I dinner, and he was like, well, I could tell he was kind of unsure about it. He was like, well, what are you thinking about making? And I was like, okay, dude, like, you sound like every girlfriend I've ever had. I get it. When I hear this said in this kind of a tone, it means, like, if I'm not about to, like, whip out, like, some, like, Wolfgang Puck style food for you, then you are not interested in eating the weird combination of nutrients that I put together on a plate. I get it. But it was funny. I haven't had that feeling for a long time. I've been single for almost a year now. It'll be end of July will be a year of my continued bachelorhood, my itinerant bachelorhood. But yeah, anyway, so James, I was walking to Publix. I had a kettlebell, had a kettlebell in one hand and armful of opportunity and hope in the other. And James happened to be walking by, and I was like, what's up, James? And he was like, hello, sir. which is, he always calls me sir. And I've asked him so many times to not do that, because I'm like, dude, you're older than I am. Don't call me sir. You're making me feel like a weirdo. It make me feel like I don't respond well to sir, respectfully. Shout out to my parents. They can verify. But anyway, James is a nice guy. And so I was like, what's up, James? And he was like, nothing. And I was like, how's it going? And he was like, well, to be honest, like, I haven't eaten anything all day. And like, I've been pretty unhappy for the last 3 days because like, I don't have a job. And like, I just don't know, like, is there anything I can do for you? Like, he always offers to help me with something, but I'm the kind of person, I really enjoy doing my own work, and I'm never really looking to outsource it or pay someone else to do it. Like, the idea of paying someone to do something that I could do, even James, like, I would rather give James money and for free and keep the tasks that I want to do as well. I'd rather pay him to not work. But, it's heartbreaking because he told me he's been out of work for 13 years. And, that's a long period of time, obviously. And it would be devastating, like, to be homeless and have no job prospects. Now, again, he needs some pretty serious help, and that's the problem. I don't know if he's actually employable. I don't know if he's got his documents that he would need in order to get a job. I don't know what kind of place would allow him to work there if he, like, given his, like, general disposition and shape, because, he's like, he does smell. I mean, he smells like a thru hiker. He smells like a human being. And, he wears, like, kind of weird clothes that I can only assume he finds. I mean, the similarities between James and my lifestyles, it's a fine line. I also smell and I look like a weirdo, so I feel for him there. But, yeah, we walked to Publix together, and I offered to buy him some food. And I was like, man, like, I would really love if, like, you could get a job at this Publix, which, they do have programs at Publix to employ, like, people who are underqualified, I suppose. But I think it would be essential for him to be able to, like, take a shower and have access to a house. And the real heartbreaking thing with James is just that, what he was really saying he wanted to do was just to have a place to go so he could sit on the couch and watch TV. And I was just like, damn, dude, that's like, that it really is, like, people talk all about data centers and all of this infrastructural stuff that's going into, the next stage of human evolution and how bad it is. But, these people, most of the people who are making all this noise, obviously they have access to phones and electricity and internet and most likely houses. But they've never, most people, myself included, most of my life anyway, I've never not been able to satisfy an urge to relax and just, like, watch TV if I want to. And that's something that James doesn't have access to, which, I think should probably be written into the universal basic human rights law structure. Like, you should have the right to, I mean, it's basically the right to pursue your own happiness, but I think it should explicitly say you have the right as a human being to a house, a couch, and a TV. Everyone else has those by default. And so I was just like, damn, like, what do you do for somebody like James? And I did a couple of Google searches and found a couple of organizations. Unfortunately, they're not open during the weekend, but there is one that's over off of Ponce that I'd like to go and, like, just pick their brain, just like at the art place, and just be like, hey, I know this guy, his name is James, he's been homeless for a very long time, he's very sweet, he's harmless, he's not addicted to anything, he definitely has mental issues cognitively. I think he's easily confused and maybe perhaps easily overwhelmed. I'm not entirely sure. I've never seen him, like, have a tantrum or anything like that, but I certainly think it's possible if he was in a bad situation. And, really what he just needs to be able to do is, like, have a safe place to go and the ability to make, like, maybe $30 a day. Like, if he could just make $30 a day so that he can go buy the food that he wants, and then also be able to go to a safe space, I think that he would be so much happier, And that's the thing, too. It's just, like, so weird to see a homeless person inside of a neighborhood. And if he wasn't as harmless as he is, there's no way he would have stayed here for so long. But he's been there for years and years and years. But I started thinking about it because I was like, okay, well, what do you actually do to solve homelessness? And it's like, okay, well, thankfully, the answer is actually in the word itself. They're homeless. That's the problem. So they need homes. And I was like, okay, well then how do you do that? Because that's like, obviously, in my fantasy, I was just like, well, this is like the kind of fantasy that I would only be able to pursue if I had like excessive amounts of money, like millions of dollars, you know? Because what I would do is I would set up like homeless hotels, right? And so basically it'd be a place that anyone can go, like that needs a place to stay. It would have a bouncer out front to make sure that you're not bringing anything bad in, and you would have to agree to the terms of staying there, which would be that you're not allowed to leave. Like there's a curfew, right? Like, but it's like a reverse curfew. If you decide to go there, like between the hours of like, I don't know, let's say 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., you're not allowed to leave. And I don't even just mean the premises, like you're not allowed to leave your room. Like I think the only way for things to be sustainable would be if these people are like basically quarantined for that 9-hour period of the day. And it's not to dehumanize them because they have to agree to this. They don't have to go to these homeless hotels. But if you just want to go sit on a couch and watch TV, you can do that. But there are rules, right? And I was like, I can't think of a better way of doing it. And obviously, again, this would be extremely wasteful in terms of capital expenditure because, you know, there would be, aside from just the goodwill of man, this would not be a money-making venture. I was imagining being interviewed, like because of this creation of the homeless hotel and its relative success, and people, I was imagining the interviewer would be like, yeah, you know, we hear that you're basically bleeding out in terms of keeping these types of places open. So can you talk to us about just sort of like the financial structure of the decision making to actually try to solve homelessness through this tactic? And I was like, well, I mean, there's a big reason why in my pursuit of wealth, I didn't focus on this idea first. This was something that I knew would only be attainable after doing something that was more in the traditional lens of, you know, wealth creation and gain. But, you know, I don't know, but I know of, like, you know, the CEO of MailChimp, right? Like Ben Chestnut. He's got $6 billion, and I don't begrudge him of that at all. Anytime I'm in a room where someone is maybe turning their nose up, and this is really just inside baseball because, like, it's really just other MailChimp people that would even think about having a personal relationship to the situation. But anytime anyone says anything untoward to Mr. Chestnut, I'm always like, I really think that most people would have made the exact same decision that he did to sell the company, just because, you know, $6 billion is a lot of money to say no to. That is like earth-shaking money, shattering money, you know? If I had $6 billion, I could spend $500,000 on these homeless hotels, you know? I could do it and not even bat an eye. I could do it without even losing sleep, you know? I've given people big tips, like 50% tips, that haunted me for hours after doing so, where I'm just like, oof, why did I do that? That person didn't need free money. If I'm going to tip anyone, I want to give James a tip, you know? And I did give him a tip the other day. I had made a little promise with God, take that as you will, that if I got my job, I would pay that forward, specifically to James, because the first day that I moved in, I saw James doing his little walk-in loop, and I was like, "What's up, James?" And he was like, "Nothing, sir." And I wasn't able to give him any money, even though he seemed like he would have appreciated even just $5, which is how much I gave him the other day. Because I was just like, you know, $5 for James, like that'll get him a portion of what he wants right now. I'm sure of it. Like whether it's an Arizona tea or a little bit of chicken from the deli at Publix, whatever it might be. But yeah, dude, it's just it's not a hard problem to fix, especially considering that we're floating in heretofore ungodly amounts of money. Where am I going? Straight? Okay, straight. So it's just a matter of like allocating it and getting people to believe in the structure of it being worth putting towards helping other people, which is by and large not something we're necessarily good at as a species, because we've grown up in a scarcity environment for the whole time. And so, the idea of having so much that you can actually take care of other people who aren't even your family members or not even part of your tribe, oof, we don't like that at all. But I've always had a soft spot in my heart for the homeless community, because honestly, I think that they serve as a reminder, and not even so much a reminder, but they are a literal litmus test for human compassion. Like, if there's a lot of homeless people, that means that there's a lot of people not caring about them. And I've always just thought, again, it's that thank God tax idea, where I'm just like, man, thank God my life is not like yours. Like, again, I don't know what factors led to the situation that you're in, and I don't judge you for any of that, because it's not like I had a huge hand in most of what's happened in my life. But I feel for you, and, I see you, and there's like no way that I could ever do enough to make up for the gaps in your life that I can see. But at a minimum, I can do the minimum, which is taking care of an immediate need right now, and also acknowledging that, yes, we actually are the same type of person. We are the same type of animal. And it's just shocking that the economic difference between the two of us leads to a severe decrease in the quality of life for James versus me. I've got so many security nets, shout out to my parents, and social structures and things like that to catch me. And I'm lucky that I'm even normal enough to have established that, because, James being the way that he is, like, it's probably hard for whatever degree of family he has for them to actually deal with him, because it's just like, I don't know. At a certain point, I'm sure that, like, James kind of prefers to be homeless, or maybe prefers to be unhelpable or unreachable or something. Because, he could have a phone, and, like, he could even have a phone that someone else is paying for that would allow him to, go into Publix and email people about jobs or look into programs that could similarly help. But I get the sense I feel like his memory is damaged from something that I think happened prenatally. Maybe his mom drank or other. I don't want to speculate that she was doing anything that's stereotypical, but because it could have just been, who knows, maybe James was born with the umbilical cord around his neck and he didn't get oxygen for the first few minutes. But something happened and it messed up his development, and there are consequences for that, and those consequences have led to him basically sleeping on this one little, it's not called parchment, not portion. He sleeps on this little bit of sidewalk over by the Restore, which is like I don't even know what you'd call it. It's kind of like a thrift store, but like a little bit. They've got brand new stuff. It's like cheap stuff. I don't even know what it is. I've only been in there like one time. I don't like going to stores like that. I'm just like, okay, I get it. There's stuff here. Let's move on. I'm not trying to put more stuff in my house, my dude. But yeah, that's all I got. And I'm 10 minutes away, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it there so I can throw this into Notebook LM and hear what they think about everything. What do you guys think about homelessness? What do you think about my views on political language and euphemistic obscurantism? There's a good one for you. Euphemistic obscurantism. And so I guess that actually makes me think, my final thought for today, for this clip, I'll have many more thoughts today, but there was this shirt that a friend, shout out to Ray, he used to wear this shirt in high school, and I always just thought it was a really cool shirt, but it says Eschew Obfuscation, which means like avoid confusion. But it's so funny because the best jokes are the ones you have to explain. But the shirt itself is confusing. Eschew Obfuscation. It's like the funniest possible way to tell people to keep it simple, by saying it with the most complicated words in English that you can't, if you're not like erudite with your linguistic palette of possibilities, those two words, they won't make any sense, which is great. You become confused. It's a, I don't even know. Notebook LM, what do you call that? I'm sure there's some sort of linguistic word that is specifically used for that. But for now, Eschew, Obfuscation, good luck even just saying it. And shout out to my parents, love you, bye.